Hi, welcome to my show. My guest today is Angela Rochon, and Angela is a friend and an author, poet, and she's a member of Detroit Working Writers, so that makes her extra special. Hi, Angela, welcome to my show.
Hello, glad to be here.
And I invited Angela today because she just published her memoir. It's called Fatherless. And I remember for years at the Detroit Working Writers Critique Group that we had the opportunity, the pleasure of reading bits and pieces of it until it finally has manifested. First of all, congratulations on the publication of your book.
Thank you, William.
Yes, I am very happy about that. I know that it was a lot of work for you. Can you tell us a little bit how many years it took?
It took a long time, and yet, when I got to the end, I said to myself, oh, am I ready to release this out to the world? Because it is a very frank memoir of my father and me.
Well, I'm going to put a front cover. I love old pictures to begin with, but this is very touching pictures, especially since I know a lot of the passages in the story. And, it's interesting that you said that there is a different feeling about writing memoir. So my first memoir series that I wrote, that was a 4-part memoir series, and I was very concerned about some of the details that I put in, and I tried to find that fine line of being respectful but authentic and real and not trying to bash anybody, and I think that as writers, it's kind of our job to kind of see where the literature and where our style is, and not kind of just to do it for the sake of just putting negative things out there. I know with you've been writing for many years in newspaper. You have newspaper columns, magazines, academic journals. What I didn't know about you until I invited you on the show is that you were a psychiatric therapist. That was new to me. So how much part of that career were you involved in, or how many years of that work?
So you would like to know about my background as a psychiatric social worker?
Yeah, and also because it seemed, and then I ended up discovering that it led you to teaching memoir, and I thought, wow, this is so interesting. How did that lead you to this? Because then you know what I'm going to ask you next, but I want to first tell us a little bit about that background.
I surely will. I am so grateful to Henry Ford Hospital, to the PACE program, which is a program that is designed to keep nursing home eligible individuals at home. And in my work as a psychiatric social worker, I would conduct reminiscence groups. Reminiscence groups give those who have limited present term memories but a whole treasure of long-term memories. And taken together in a small group, one person will speak about her early home life when she was 3 years old, 7 years old, and then someone else will pick up on that and talk about her early years. And then maybe some man will talk about when his father took him to have his first haircut. And it's just joyful because some people are largely silent. But when given the opportunity to talk about the past, the reminiscence becomes a therapeutic environment.
Well, having learned this about you, now I understand why you have so much sympathy for me taking care of my mom who has Alzheimer's, and I see that you understand the work involved in that, and even just the person who has Alzheimer's, what they go through. But then there was another interesting thing that you mentioned, that this helps you write your memoir. How was that?
Well, William, that was a delightful surprise to me, too. At this point, I am the oldest capable member of my family. However, my aunt, my mother's sister, listened to me when I would read my manuscript aloud. She has a severe memory loss situation, and she would kind of doze off, and then I would read to her. And once I was reading to her about what I was writing about my parents' wedding. And she opened her eyes and she said, "Cookies." And I thought, and then I realized that you don't have an Italian wedding without Italian cookies. And that led me to contacting her aunt, who made the cookies and gave me the recipe. I put the recipe in the book, and my aunt went back to a sleepy situation. And then she opened her eyes and said, "Rations." I never thought about the fact that my parents were married during wartime. And during wartime, you had to have rations for sugar and flour. You had to have rations for gas and tires. And what happened in our little town, in my grandmother's home, was that the people in our village of Elginak shared their rations. They shared their rations so my father's people could come, drive from Youngstown, Ohio, and attend the wedding. And so that my grandmother and all the neighbors could work together to make the cookies and prepare the meals that were required of a full day of wedding celebration.
What a story. That in itself, the relationship between you and your aunt and how she would just throw this one word and then you'd investigate. And I was sharing a picture. I love that wedding picture that you sent. Really so lovely. But, I'm sure having written this kind of memoir, spending so much time and energy on it, and it's what you said, it's like, 460 pages?
Yes.
Okay. What did that do for you as a person? Because especially when you write memoirs, whenever you write any book, there's a transformation that happens within the author themselves, because they are the first reader and they are creating the story that really has an impact on them before it starts having an impact on the reader. But particularly a memoir, because you're going back in time and you're discovering a lot of things about yourself. What was that experience like for you as a memoirist?
Oh, thank you, Meen. I'm so glad that you asked me, Ween, because what this book did for me is what it will do for anyone or anyone's memoir, and that is help you to revisit the past. And in revisiting the past, I had to make some posthumous apologies to some people whom I really didn't like very well.
Oh, this sounds very familiar in a lot of homes, I'm sure.
But once I really learned more about their really tough lives and the challenges that they faced, I had to recognize that maybe if they're not the most soft and quiet type of people, and maybe if they're contentious sometimes, it's because they really had to make their way in the new world. Some of them, since my book spans 6 generations.
Wow.
Some of them were leaving Italy because of World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Others fought in World War II. Others went through the Depression. They went through very lean times. And I am sure that I would be a very different person if I had had the experiences that they did.
Yeah, and we talked about that, you and I, the other day. We were at the DWW Christmas luncheon, and we were talking about that, how writing memoir helped us forgive and understand. Well, first, because we were able to understand situations that other people experienced, and you kind of put yourself in their shoe.
Yes.
And I think that's some people misunderstand, maybe the fact that it's just you're putting all your laundry out. It's not. It's really when you come from a loving place and a caring place to try to understand, why were these relationships like that? Why did this person behave and such? Then you start realizing, wow, they suffered in this way. And when the behavior you start, there's always, like they say, there's 2 sides to every story. You start seeing the other side of the story. That's where the forgiveness comes, and that's when you decide it doesn't happen to everybody, but you made this conscious decision, as I had, to come in terms with some of these relationships and try to change them. So I know this was really life-changing for you. And aside from that, and again, I started experiencing the loveliness of this story a long time ago when I was part of the, when I was attending the critique groups. The fact that you would write about the family gathering at the kitchen, and you would bring in the Italian cooking and then your culture. And so funny, because when I would be reading it and I would feel how our home is as a Middle Eastern kitchen, and writing a memoir, that's what it does. It kind of connects you, and you start finding similarities. And we are all so alike in so many ways, especially once you put us in a kitchen. When you put us into a certain situation, it's like, yeah, I know what a kitchen feels like, and the warmth of the food, and but I really love that about it. But tell us a little bit about Angelo. Was your father's name?
That was his name.
Yes, and so this is really a lot of it is. It was a result of you wanting to kind of honor the memory and kind of going back into your heritage about that. So tell us a little bit about who Angelo was and what happened to him.
Oh, it is my pleasure to do that, William. And to pick up on the theme of food, Italians use an expression. It is called good like bread. Good like bread. Bread is basic. Bread sustains us. Every culture has their own special bread. Every man I've loved in my whole life makes their own bread, and the smell of bread and the feel of bread and the genuine quality. So I remember my father's grandmother, who did not speak English, but in Italian would say, "You're good like bread." And he was. He was kind and he was good.
Can you tell us a little bit of this picture? What was he married yet, or is this?
Well, this picture is kind of interesting because my father was actually stationed in a tiny village in Michigan. He was stationed in Michigan and sent from his hometown, a huge hometown of Youngstown, Ohio, booming economy, filled with steel mills and the big ovens that burst fire into the sky as they were smelting steel. So instead of being sent off to war in Guam or whatever, they sent him to Algonac, Michigan, a village of 2,000 people. And he got there and he looked around and he said, "Where are the people? Where are the cars?" And they sent him to Algonac, Michigan, because that is the birthplace of Chris Craft boats. Chris Craft boats, the U.S. government commandeered the boat factory and asked that a portion of that company be used to make the landing craft at Normandy. And other companies throughout the whole country did the same. So that's why my father came.
I have a picture of that company.
I think you do.
Yeah, it's. Oh, there. Wait. Wasn't coming up.
Yes, that's right. There he is, the world's largest builders of motor
I wasn't
boats.
sure what that was. Okay.
And they, in fact, helped to make the landing craft for Normandy.
And now, what is this picture right here?
Well, here's my father years later. He fell in love with this little town as opposed to his big, sprawling town. And more importantly, he fell in love with a beautiful Italian woman, my mother.
Yes, she is very beautiful. That is a beautiful picture.
They met at her sister's wedding because he was lonesome for Italian people. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Oh, sure, we'll have a lonely GI. He can certainly come to the wedding." Well, he not only came to the wedding, but he fell in love with their oldest daughter.
Oh,
and
God.
2 months later, they were married.
Wow. And they had how many kids? I know you have...
I have one sister, my sister and I, and we both became fatherless when my dad died.
And these are cousins?
These are the cousins with whom I have reunited, and that's the joy of this book. The joy is reconciliation after a 50-year feud with the family. So I want others, and other readers have said to me that they have begun to contact family members to try to bridge the gap when a connection has been lost.
Yeah, so tell us about that a little. Well, also what I noticed is you created, let me see if I can bring them. Can you tell us, did you put this together, and was this part of your research about the family?
Did I put this together, Weem? I'd love to tell you about this. This is something that I learned, and I'm so grateful for my instructors as I learned to become a therapist. Therapists would use this type of a genogram, or medical doctors. And if you notice in the legend, you can specify for certain areas. I thought it would be very important to my family members and friends to know what the major causes of deaths were. And when you see
wow.
these in a visual, you realize you have to be very careful since there's a lot of heart disease in my family.
Mhm.
There's a lot of diabetes, and there's early deaths, sudden deaths, violent deaths. And then there are other factors that you can also program in. So it is called a genogram, and it shows 6 generations of my family, all of whom came as immigrants without language from Italy.
Now, I noticed there's a homicide.
And there is a homicide.
There's a homicide. And what's the story with that? I know you, don't you address it in the book? I'm not trying
do.
to cross line. Okay. I know because it's in the description. So, yeah, that's interesting. But there's a story behind that.
There certainly
Did
is.
you know the story from before you did your research already?
I did not. And that was one of the surprises in writing the book. And one of the
yeah, because we could have just thought, because I read, what was the issue with that, but then sometimes when you don't know, when you don't research, you could take it as a totally different story.
To respond to the the members of my family, really everyone in my family, they really are very good, hardworking, good people, except the murderer. Except the murderer in my family.
There's always one person. It just works that way, Angela.
For sure.
Somebody has to make it exciting,
That's right. Well, and also shameful. So that's a whole story in itself. In fact, the readers will find that to be quite interesting.
Yes. And there's other, this is pictures. So how did your father pass away? Because he passed away
He
at
did.
an early...
He did. He died
When you were early, but at an early age. But he was young as well.
He was young, and he died suddenly in the night.
Oh.
It was a winter night near Christmas. He said, I don't really feel very well. And he went to bed and went to sleep and was dead in the morning.
Wow. How old was he?
49.
Wow. So he was young. And how old were you?
16. My sister was 13. And my sister and I really had a terrible loss. It's a terrible thing when you lose a father. And my father himself, his father had been killed before he was born, and his stepfather was killed when he was 12. So we do have a history of early death. His brother died at age 4 of pneumonia. And I think that many times in the years before we had different medications, there were many deaths. There were grandmothers that had 9 babies, and they only raised 5 children. This was not an uncommon thing.
And how did your mom deal with that? Because I'm sure at that time it wasn't like today. It still would be hard regardless. But he was probably the sole breadwinner, and then at that time, women were not really as involved in the financial aspect of their household.
That's a very good question. So how did my mother deal with it? She did the very best that she could, and her sisters helped her. My sister and I, became almost instant adults, which happens. It happens when a parent dies.
Mm-hmm.
You suddenly have to be, almost like you're in a lifeboat. When you lose your father, it's almost like when you're in a lifeboat and you lose the paddle. There is a big, big impact on a family when you lose a parent. And I tried to get to the concept of what it means to be fatherless. We need fathers. We need mothers.
Yes.
We need each other.
I agree.
Friends.
I think family is very important. And I was listening the other day to, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's like an Indian yogi and a best-selling author. And his name is Sadhguru. Have you ever heard of him?
I have not.
Okay. Very interesting. They were asking him about marriage, and he said, there's no, it's not right or wrong to get married or not to get married, or to stay together or not to stay together. He said, however, when you invest in having a child, that there is a responsibility that goes with that. He said it's a minimum 20-year project. That's what he called it. And I thought, it was an interesting way of defining that, but it's true. He said that you would need to be willing to invest into that commitment because of that child needs that stability, as well as, and when you look at the world and the trauma that happens as a result of sometimes parents separating and everything. And it's not about just that, the parents are separating, and sometimes people think it's more like maybe a psychological thing or not. But really, there is something in that unity to help the child grow in a more healthy environment. And now when you're saying that, yeah, so the impact of that, and my father, I think I was like 15 when I lost, and my other siblings were much older, but I also felt like that was too young for me because I didn't get to really know him. But my brothers kind of stepped up and were like kind of the father figures. But that family dynamics is very important. So yeah, I can imagine that for your mom, it must have been, aside from becoming a widow at a young age, and she also had to continue to raise on her own the two daughters.
That's absolutely true, Weem. And unfortunately, in my genogram, as you look at the various members of the family, there are many young widows. My aunt was 31 years old. She had 4 children, and the youngest was 2
From
years
your
old.
mom's or dad's side?
On my mom's side.
Really? So
she
from
had a 2-year-old.
Okay.
And a total of 4 children. She was 31 years old, and she was not a working outside of the home person. It changed her whole life. My mother was 39. My sister was 39 when her husband died. There are a lot of early deaths in my life. And when you mentioned the gentleman from India, I traveled to India, and I stayed with a family of a widow and her mother and her father and her child. And living together, that family supported each other and helped each other. There's very much of that intergenerational support in the areas of Kerala, India, where I visited.
Well, and that's why, when you say about your memoir, helping people reconcile and the importance of forgiveness, and I think we need that so much today. Sometimes situations push us into maybe disconnecting, especially immigrating. We were talking about how new immigrants, in the process of the struggle, there might be these detachments that happen because they're in a survival mode oftentimes. But the importance, at least in your case, where you came full circle, it was so beautiful when you were mentioning some of the stories. And I really encourage people, to read that, to kind of see, because I was so touched by the stories and how you reconnected to your cousins. But with us we have like a couple of minutes left, and you've been writing for many years. And you, as I mentioned, you're a DWW member. You're also a speaker. This is another thing I didn't know about you, but you earned the Toastmasters International. And I asked you, what was DTM? And you said the DTM stands for?
The highest standard of the Toastmasters
Congratulations.
International.
See, it's
Thank
like
you.
Sometimes we tend to, with our friends, not know as much as we should. We just like them because we know who they are, and you're writing. But I'm impressed by that. So, but you're also, and you say you really enjoy speaking.
I do.
Yeah. So, but what advice? Because again, this took you a while to put together. It can be very frustrating. A lot of people sometimes just stop. Feel like this is too much work, it's taken up too many years. If you were to give an advice to a writer, whether an emerging writer or a writer, even if they're on their 20th book, but then they're maybe stuck or just fed up with it, what advice would you give? And especially, with regards to writing memoir.
Well, there are 2 responses to that. One, I wrote at the end of my book, Resources, and I wrote 15 suggestions for writing memoir.
Oh, gosh.
One suggestion, and that is something that everyone should do today. Think of one happy incident. One incident. Not a whole series of events, but one time when you were very happy, and write about that. Write it in your handwriting, and then type it in so that your next generations can read them.
Yes.
Because sometimes they don't know how to write or read cursive writing. And then take that little sheet of paper or sheets of paper and put them in your safety deposit box. That's a legacy for all the generations to come. Something in your hand about your life. So start today. That's what I would suggest.
Start today, yes. It is just, I'm really, impressed that you put something like this. Sometimes you don't know where something is going. I know it needed a lot of revisions and such. Um, Regarding speaking, do you usually speak about your writing, or are there other topics that you have interest in?
Thank you for asking, William. Currently, I'm speaking about encouraging people to write their own memoirs. In fact, I'm teaching people to do that, and I have many
Yeah, and
upcoming events.
right, you'd mentioned that, and I know a lot of your events happen to be in some particular areas. If you can mention it, and then people
Certainly,
can go online and check the dates for those.
absolutely. I am scheduled in January, February, March, April in St. Clair County. Contact the St. Clair County Community College, where I will be presenting in a session throughout the day. It's called the Community College College Day. It's April 16th. It's in Port Huron. Contact the St. Clair County Library System, where I will be making presentations in different
I think like on a
colleges
monthly basis, aren't
on
you?
a monthly basis,
Yeah.
and they will give you the address and time. And basically, those are all free, and they are open to the public, and they give you an opportunity to learn how to write your own memoir, because every memoir is different, and nothing is particularly right or wrong. It's your story, and you need to leave a legacy.
Yeah, leave a legacy. And writing your own memoir, it's everybody has a story. So it's not like you have to sit there and try to make anything up. You have that story that you just need to tap into. And I'm sure in your workshop you kind of help them do something of that.
I do, and I'm so grateful to Detroit Working Writers. So grateful.
Yeah, me too. I've really had a good time with Detroit Working Writers. So, well, I really appreciate that you took the time to come on the show and share your story about your father. I know there was, some other pictures. I'm gonna go through them. I think I went through most of the pictures here. But here's your book again. It's available on Amazon. And are you gonna continue writing, or do you have another project in mind?
I have begun another book at this point, and I'm helping those who have experienced cancer in their lives, either as survivors or as those who mourn for those they love. So that's what I'm working on now.
Okay, then maybe we'll have you back then.
I will look forward to that.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Good luck with your book.